And we are live.
If I could be you, if you could be me for just 1 hour, if we could find a way to get inside each other's mind, if you could see you through my eyes instead of your ego, I believe you'd be surprised to see that you've been blind. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes. Hello, folks. My name is Michael David, and I am the musical director of the Irondale Ensemble projects to protect, serve, and understand. And welcome to our webinar for tonight. And we're going to take you on a very interesting journey tonight. And at this point, I would like to introduce you to our executive director of the project, as well as the co-creator of this particular project to protect, serve, and understand, Terry Greiss. Take it, Terry.
Am I here? Oh, I'm
You are here.
That in itself is a feat.
Yes.
Thank you, Michael David. I am Terry Greiss, and I'm here at Irondale, here in Fort Greene. We honor and acknowledge that we are streaming from Brooklyn, New York, the ancestral land and territory of the Lenape Nation. And as we come together tonight, please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us here. Tonight, I am in the theater, well, almost by myself. There's somebody in the next room. But you know why we're still closed. There's no one here still, but there will be soon, we promise you. So tonight we're conjuring up the spirits of those who have inhabited this space at Irondale. And to that end, I'd like to welcome you to our newest experiment, the second in a series of 2 Zoomcast versions of To Protect, Serve, and Understand. Irondale has a long history of responding to important issues of the day through our work as theater artists. And this program started a little more than 5 years ago as our attempt to use the technique of the actor to try and bridge the communication gap between police officers and community members. On Tuesday nights for 10 weeks at a time, officers and civilians learned to improvise, to sing, to tell stories, but mostly they learned to listen and to really hear each other. We broke bread together, we argued, cried, spoke about injustice, racism, privilege, and often came to a greater understanding of each other. Agreement? No, not necessarily. Understanding was the goal. We tried to bring people who are at polar opposites in their beliefs about each other a little closer to the equator. Over 100 officers and civilians have gone through the program, and almost 3,000 people have borne witness to it in performances. Tonight, you will see civilians voice the words of police officers, and police officers voice the words of civilians. We ask them and you to listen carefully to what they say. I think you'll hear an intuitive discussion about the relationships between law enforcement and civilians in America today. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce the third member of our team, Rivka Rivera. Rivka.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you all for joining us this evening for our second in this virtual experiment, in this virtual show. I've had the honor of working on this program for the past 4 years, and I'm really grateful we get to do this tonight. So over the past few months, we've actually paused the workshops and performances of TPSU, not only because of COVID, but also in order to reflect deeply on exactly what it means to do such a project and work on such a project in this particularly difficult and painful time. The work of TPSU is collaboratively created by the participants, civilians, police officers, and TPSU facilitators. The NYPD supports officer participation in the program, but the content you're about to hear is guided and directed entirely by Irondale facilitators. We come to this work with a range of experiences and political points of view. We offer no agenda other than a belief in the tools and power of theater to help us to listen, to understand, and to sit in complexity together. Michael David.
Thank you, Rivka. And now, let us introduce our participants for tonight. Drum roll, please. Brrr. I have a whole band here with me. Brrr. First of all, Demetrius, put on your camera. Show us your face.
Good day, good day.
Introduce yourself, sir.
I am Police Officer Starling. I've been with the NYPD for 15 years now. I am from the alumni of Irondale's Protective Service 2019 class, and I'm just happy to be.
And who will you be presenting tonight?
Tonight, I will be presenting Miss Cynthia Grayman-Pond.
Excellent. Joe Frayne.
Good evening. My name is Jo Frayne Lagande, mother of two. I was part of TPSU 6, and it was a great experience, and I'm back for more.
And who will you be portraying tonight?
Tonight, I am Miguel Van Brackel.
Officer Miguel Van Brackel. Yes, let's not forget that. The one and only Michael Sanders. Speak to us, my brother.
Hello, how is everybody? My name is Michael Sanders. I'm an actor, mime, and poet, and I am an alumni of the 2019 TPSU class. And tonight I will be portraying Police Officer Henry Rivera.
And he, last but not least, he who shall be named, Miguel. Speak to us, my friend.
My name is Miguel Van Brackel. I'm a police officer in the 6-7 precinct. I've been a police officer for 7.5 years. I was an alumni of TPSU in winter of 2018, and tonight I will be playing Jo Frayne Lagande.
Excellent. We look forward to all of the musings tonight. And let me throw this back to Terry.
Okay, I'm going to also ask, especially Demetrius and Michael, to turn your volumes up a little bit, if you can. Thank you. So here we go. Tonight's Zoomcast will be two parts.
In fact, hold on, Terry. Let's have everybody turn up their volume just a little bit, if you would. Great. Sorry, Terry, go for it.
Tonight's Zoomcast is going to be in two parts. There'll be a performance part, if you will, and then there'll be a discussion. And we hope you'll participate in the Q&A either as a panelist, as a Zoom web participant, or on YouTube. You can type into the chat and it will get relayed to us. So we're going to get started. Each of our players has interviewed another. In the workshop, they will have memorized the words of the interview, but this time we didn't have 10 weeks, so they'll be using their scripts tonight. I'm going to hide my camera, and I'm going to ask our four players to close their eyes, and you folks out there in Zoom land, do the same. And just focus on your breath. Just try it. Just really breathe nice and easily. Now fill that blank screen behind your closed eyes with the image of someone you know, but not quite so well. Each of our participants is going to imagine the person they interviewed. See that person as clearly as possible. Repeat their names and send that repetition of their names through your entire body. So Officer Demetrius Starling, see Cynthia Grayman-Pond. And say her name to yourself over and over again. Michael Sanders, see Officer Henry Rivera. Jo Frayne Lagande, see Officer Miguel Van Brackel. and Officer Van Brackel see Jofrane Legande. You're all out there, see your other, hear their voices, see their facial expressions. And now, turning your cameras on, starting with Officer Starling, let us know Cynthia. Begin, guys.
My name is Cynthia Raymond Palm. I was a principal and superintendent in Brownsville, Brooklyn, 73rd Precinct area. That's right. I was a principal of 284. I was in the midst of 17 projects. I was a principal through K through 8. So when I started, I had 1,100 students and a staff of over 100. I worked in District 23 for almost 25 years.
My name is Miguel Van Brackel. So I've been on the force for 7 years now, 7.5 years, the entire time in Flatbush. The 6-7 precinct, I grew up in New York, went to John Dewey High School, spent my entire life in Brooklyn pretty much. I was born in the projects right across from 1PP. Moved out to Brooklyn, went to college upstate, and then came back down. And I was actually, for several years, I worked in marketing. So I had the chance to experience corporate life doing the rat race back and forth.
My name is Police Officer Henry Rivera. I've been a police officer since 2006. Was born and raised in Queens, Jackson Heights. Currently work in the confines of the 73rd Precinct, which is Brownsville, Brooklyn. That's where I started and that's where I am. I could have been a firefighter in retrospect, and I probably should have done that. But no, I don't regret it.
My name is Jofrane Legande. I'm a 37-year-old Haitian American. My mother is of Haitian descent, and she immigrated back in the 1970s to Brooklyn. And so I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and Flatbush, Brooklyn. And I'm gonna stop saying Brooklyn so much because I do love Brooklyn. I'm a total Brooklynite.
I remember taking the job. I remember the excellent principal said, when I come to work, I see nothing but devils and demons up in here. And when I took the job, I envisioned, and I think it was all mental, emotional, and spiritual. I envisioned angels sitting up in the windows, protecting my kids as we came into the building every day. I did the job for as long as I could, but it was deep. It was deep working up in there.
When I was in school, in college, I really thought I wanted to be a teacher. And then after speaking to my stepfather, I realized he told me, be careful what you choose. Make sure you really love something, but also make sure it pays.
During the big economic downturn that we had, I decided I needed to do something different. Jobs were hard to come by, and the country as a whole was in a pretty tough spot economically. And I thought, this would be a good chance to fulfill one of my lifelong dreams, to be a police officer.
Not even until maybe just recently did I look back and say, man, maybe I made the wrong choice. But I think we do that in all parts of our lives. I think that's just kind of a natural, normal thing. I actually love my job, love my position, what I do. So I don't regret it that much. But there are some moments when I second guess.
Yeah. So if I wasn't a media specialist, I would probably pursue something like being a motivational speaker, like kind of a life coach in a sense. I love to speak with people. I love to meet people. I think there are a lot of people out there that just need someone to listen to them and to kind of understand and to not judge them, but to kind of point them in the right direction, kind of help them know that they're kind of on the right path in their life. Or if they're not in the right path, kind of help them see what they can kind of inspire themselves to get on the right path. If I wasn't doing what I was doing now, more than likely I would probably be working with people, which I kind of do now.
I love the kids. Every day, my motto was the kids come first. I went to work in service of the kids.
So I've been on the force for 7 years now, 7.5 years. Flatbush, the 6-7 precinct. And ultimately, I ended up getting a couple of complaints that put me into the TPSU program, which was a great experience. You know, it's funny, at first, when I first got on the force, you know, I really enjoyed being a police officer. I really did. You know, it was still new and I was still learning, and I still enjoy being a police officer. But there are definitely times that I regret the choice I made, because I think a lot of negativity that's associated with policing can really change your perspective on this. And I've had a hard time, especially over the last couple of years, trying to reconcile that with the person I am.
I went to funerals for some of my kids. You know what that was like? I knew every kid by name, 1,100 kids, and I knew every kid by name. I knew, you know, what it was like to go to a funeral of a kid that dies from meningitis, no more than the age of 8. Many times I was in my office just boo-hooing. Now, and I had officers of the 73rd precinct who were there for me, right there, right there.
Police brutality is the act of not seeing someone as another human being. That is the definition, because I think a lot of times with police brutality is the officer not being able to see that person as their cousin, brother, son, daughter, grandmother, mother, aunt, a family member, a friend, a coworker. I think sometimes officers get to a place where they become jaded by their position, desensitized by the power, and kind of demoralized by the response, the community response that they get. So in a situation that can probably be de-escalated by taking a moment, thinking about putting yourself in that person's shoes, in essence, kind of creates the energy for police brutality. And when you just literally have some officers who are part of the Klan who just use the badge as a way to get off their racism. So it's, yeah, police brutality.
You know, if you know anything about apprehending perps, the perp and for the perp and for myself, the safest place to be is on the ground. You want to be on the ground. You want to be down there where nobody can be reaching for any weapons. That's the safest place to be. So when they criminalize that, that's tough. That's like going out there saying, hey, sir, come over here. Oh, but okay, if you resist, then I'll have to let you go. That's not an effective way to do your job. It's not an effective way to be a police officer.
There was a situation where I was maybe a year off my foot post tenure. I was driving one of my sergeants and we responded to an armed robbery. And when we responded to the armed robbery, there was an elderly gentleman there that was just held up at gunpoint. I mean, they scared him pretty bad. They put a gun in his face. He gave us the description and I gave chase on foot. And I wound up apprehending one of the individuals. And a group of cops, they wound up apprehending the second individual. And we recovered a defaced weapon. I mean, it was a loaded firearm, you know? So the gentleman had a pretty extensive criminal history, and it felt good to take a gun off the street, you know, that could possibly be used to hurt people. So that was one of the better days that I've had on the force. That felt really good.
And I have observed police brutality throughout my life. And normally what I do is I do step up. If the situation allows it, I feel that the person is truly being brutalized, because at times I do see where people, civilians, antagonize the situation. And so it depends, but it depends. If I observe police brutality, I do pay attention to see what's going on and see if I can hear, if it's a situation where I can record or take a picture. I do. I've done that.
In my 15 years, I've never seen blatant police brutality. It's a hard question to ask. I think if I saw blatant police brutality, that I would intervene. I know I would intervene. That's something that's just not acceptable.
You know, going beyond what you're allowed to do in that situation, not a failure of judgment, but a failure of action, of exceeding the actions that are necessary in order to accomplish your goal, right? So if you egregiously attack someone in the course of police work for no reason or for a reason, that is unjustifiable. Then that's police brutality, right?
I've also been a civilian my whole life, right? And I've been stopped by cops for something that's petty. But that's something to enforce, right? So I get it, but it is what it is.
Well, I was in my neighborhood, 21st and Dorchester, 70 precinct. We're known as the jungle. Yeah, we know as, I grew up knowing that our sector was the jungle. That is where the rookies came to train every summer, and we knew it. So on that particular day, I was walking down a street, and I can't even remember that who was it that was being harassed. It was one of my childhood friends, and this particular kid, a very studious, he goes to work. He's from the neighborhood, but he's not of the neighborhood. And so he's getting into his car, and it was a situation where he oftentimes often would leave their car running and play music. I guess that's what the situation was. So on that particular day, I guess, they were harassing him. And I guess I sort of questioned what was happening and if that was his car. So I was recording from across the street. I was recording and what was happening. And hey, look, you're arresting him or you're taking him for no reason. So long story short, I ended up getting arrested. I ended up being arrested for helping that situation. This big black officer came to me and he proceeded to ask me why I'm recording. And I say that there are officers that take that badge and title and let it go to their ego. I was on the sidewalk. So I wasn't doing anything illegal at all. And he was saying that I was doing something illegal, but I'm like, no, I know that I can record in a public street because that's public activity. And as long as I don't come within 5 feet of you of what you're doing, I'm good. So he proceeded to pursue me and come take my phone, you know, all this. And I'm like, look, like all this you're doing, I'm allowed to do it because I know who I was. I was already working with the Drop the Rock campaign, and I was volunteering with the New York Correctional Association. So I was like, okay, you're going to do all of this because you feel like, you know, you've got a badge and I'm on this block. So I'm nothing. I'm nobody. So I allowed him to manhandle me. He threw me down to the floor. Like he put the handcuffs on me so hard, and I had bruises, and they held me in a cell for 2 hours over at the 7-0 precinct. In order not to get in trouble, they put my name down. They didn't even put my right name down on the ticket. They called me Josephine something. So yeah, I went through all of that. And finally, when they let me go, I said, okay, don't worry, because you'll be seeing me again. You know, at times, because you just don't even know who you're dealing with. So, you know, it's fine.
For a couple of decades now, it's pretty much been a Black community. I used to get a lot of, you're stopping me because I'm Black. That was something I had to deal with. But my response was always the same. I'd always say, sir, let's take a step back. Let's look around. I can't possibly be picking on you because everybody's Black. So it's not that I'm singling you out. Everybody's Black. If you were white, if you were a white guy and everybody was Black, then I would be singling you out. I get it. It's annoying. It's got to be annoying. Especially when everybody's pretty much dressed the same too. But it's also a necessity. I can't not do my job because I'm afraid I'll hurt your feelings. Crimes are happening. People maybe don't want to acknowledge it, but they're happening. So it sucks, doesn't it?
I think there are instances where you see these acts on TV and you think, oh, all cops are bad. This is an example of it. And you know, everyone's free to make their own conclusions and whatnot. And I fully expect, you know, people to make those conclusions based on their experiences and what they think is right or wrong. But it's whether it's a consequence of that. It's just a shift in overall perception because of it. There's definitely a lot more negativity towards police action now than when I first started out, you know. But I feel like overall, especially in the last year, it just snowballed. It swung more in the direction where we have less support. So you're going out there and you're doing the things we need to do on a day-to-day basis. And that becomes much more difficult because without community support, it's really difficult to be a police officer. There's been times when, because of those things I've faced, I question whether this was the right path for me as a person.
I have a nephew who's a police detective, and I said to him, how do you understand defunding the police?
Policing should be humanized. That should be, you know, the clear cut when they say defund the police.
He was like, oh, well, you mean you want to get rid of my job? Y'all don't want to give me my overtime. That is what that means. I said, that's not what it means for me. For me, I said to him, y'all are getting $1 billion. You mean to tell me that you can't break off $1 billion into some community activism to get some of the social workers support and train, to get some other people who deal with mental health to be a part of the team?
Those funds could be shifted somewhere else. It could be shifted elsewhere that might help reduce our need to like interact with people of different capacities, like mental illness, or substance abuse. There's room for that. And we should find ways to do that. But one thing I don't agree with, which is throwing the baby out with the bathwater, is reducing training and reducing funding for programs that help bridge the gap with the community. It just kills me to think that if some of these communities had the right resources deployed at the right times, a lot of what we're dealing with now wouldn't be happening.
I don't want you to totally defund the police. That's not going to work either. Because yeah, there are those Billy Bobs and those Tommies out there trying to hurt people. So yes, I do want a police force that's actually focused on going after criminals, not criminalizing people, which is what they do to young Black and brown boys, is that they put them in the system. They roll them through. It's this continued slave catching mentality of, we're going to log you once you're outside. Oh, your face is not normal. I'm not used to seeing your face. So what's your name? Where are you? Who are you? And it's like, no, that's not policing.
Okay, so let's stay there for a minute, okay? Because my feeling is that people put much high regard on the police department. That's when something is evident. And it is happening in various places in the community. It's alarming. It's alarming. People feel it's endemic. It's a pattern. I feel in some way that Trump has weaponized police departments all over the country. And because I put a high regard and faith in policing, that when stuff happens and it looks like it's a pattern, I have to question that.
When the city council made laws criminalizing the apprehension of perpetrators, like if someone's on the ground and I have my knee on their back, that kind of stuff, that's a big deal, because that's half the people we arrest, in my experience, do some kind of resistance or fought back. So how do you expect us to thoroughly do our job without having to put our hands on someone? Unfortunately, in our profession, putting your hands on a certain suspect, sometimes it's a thing. It's a natural thing. So you're really tying our hands behind my back when you don't allow me the opportunity to use the force that I need to apprehend a perp.
Okay, reform and defunding. For me, it's two different things. All right? That's where people are getting it kind of twisted. There's conflicting the two. Now, the reform is like, hey, we don't want you to put your knees on people's necks to subdue them. Defunding means is, I don't think the police department is innovative in that way, that they think about innovation. And so how do you use the $5 billion that you get so that other services can happen to support policing and people at the same time? When you call the police, no social workers or mental health people. The police do everything. They can't do everything. Go ahead. But you're not the only resource.
I don't want criminals. I don't want criminals running around putting people at risk. So when you say defund the police, defund them in ways where street crime units are used to go into neighborhoods to infiltrate what's going on. We don't need infiltration. We need prevention.
The cop didn't do anything wrong. But to me, it just didn't sit right. If I remember correctly, it was an older woman and some kid walking their dogs unleashed, right? He decides that these are the people he's going to give them summonses for the unleashed dogs or whatever. Now, mind you, he didn't do anything wrong. He's enforcing a violation. That's written. That's been there. It's always been there. But did he really have to pick these two people? You know what I'm saying? Did he really? So they're upset, obviously. They were very upset. Why are you picking on me? I'm just walking my dog, right? I wasn't going to say anything to him on the street with them there. It's just not a professional thing to do, right? And mind you, they're like, this is what you guys do. This is why everybody hates us. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that is why everybody hates us. This is exactly why everyone fucking hates us, right? So I was upset. I can't explain to you how upset I was with this dude. It was like, bro, you fucking kidding me, guy? I'm bringing you back to the precinct. I'm not working with you, bro. I brought him back and I said, have a nice fucking night, bro. I left him alone. I refused to work with him.
All right. So now let me tell you about my son. So my son is 31 years old. So I basically kind of raised him as a single parent. And that's one thing I worried about, used to worry about, was the profiling thing with the police, okay?
It's racism that is structured throughout the whole. That's what it seems to me. There's an underlying thread of racism throughout our system. And it kind of manifests itself in different ways. All in keeping certain people in their predetermined strata. I've seen racism in different parts of my life. I've definitely seen more racism in corporate America than I have in the New York City Police Department.
So, like, for instance, with this officer, you're a black man. You're 6 feet tall, 6'1", 6'2", black man. Probably like 200 something pounds. And you feel the need to manhandle a 5'5", at that time probably 150-pound young woman, proceeding to say, oh, you want to be a boy. I'm going to handle you like a boy. He automatically assumed that I was gay. Exhibiting systematic racism without even flinching, because he was trained in a way, he was on the force long enough. I do believe in, if you're on the force long enough, you do kind of lose your way sometimes.
I actually just recently saw the video in its entirety. But let's go back to the first snippet that came on social media, on Facebook. Man, it was like, what the fuck? Very upsetting. It brought me to anger and tears, because it's like, bro, how stupid are you? Not even stupid. How badly trained are you? What's going on?
With that said, I think all people are capable of evil. And I think everyone has to stop and look at how they're interacting with the fellow person almost on a minute-to-minute basis. You have to be aware of that, of what you're doing and how you're treating people, and ask yourself, is this okay? Would I be okay with being treated this way? Would I be okay with my mother being treated this way?
It's terrible, because I never want to see that. Any human being in that situation, obviously screaming for help, right? It's just terrible. It was not an easy thing to watch. It was It was my initial reaction watching the whole video. In its entirety, it did not change my initial reaction. Let's be clear about something. Chauvin, that's his name, right? There are Chauvins in every department. I'm not saying that they're murderers. I'm not saying that Chauvin is a murderer. I'm just saying that there are cops that sometimes use poor judgment in certain situations, even myself. I'm sure if you look back over the 15 years, that there's thousands of incidents I've had with people on the street. I'm sure that you can pick a handful of decisions that I've made and look back and say, I probably could have done much better. To the degree that someone dies, I like to think that I've never been that bad. We're all human beings. We all make human mistakes. Even with training, even with years of experience, something can go terribly wrong at any moment. That's life. This job has always been hard, regardless. Chauvin, didn't change that. It became a national thing, and there's a wave of effect because of it. But that's the job. That's always been policing.
Us using force is not pretty. And it's not something that I enjoy doing at all. If I could have no interactions with people that required force for the rest of my career, I'd be very happy. And it's something that when you do have to actually use force to accomplish whatever it is you're trying to do, the constant fear of not only injuring, but of, you're in constant worry that am I gonna wind up in the newspaper tomorrow? Am I gonna wind up in the office of IAB being investigated because I was just doing my job? Like, what's gonna happen to me because I was trying to? I was called here and I need to do whatever it is I need to do in regards to the situation. But now the people around me are saying, they're saying that I'm being brutal, even though I'm simply just doing my job as I've been trained to do. That's not to say that more training isn't required.
The police force, when there is systematic racism, it's present because the police force was literally developed to catch slaves. And it was later repurposed to turn into community assistance. So the very act of patrolling a neighborhood is racism itself.
And if that's the goal, to keep people safe and preserve human life, reduce fear, right? Prevent crime. The only way we can really do that as a department is to have the community on our side. So regardless of what the reality is, if the community thinks we're against them, then that's it, right? If that's what the actual perception is of the department, is being against the community, then our mission is going to fail. So we have to be able to change the perception. We have to be able to change the view of policing in the community. And if we don't, it's only going to spiral out of control more.
You're responsible for yourself and your actions. And if your actions are so reckless and so bad, someone ends up dying because of your actions, you're absolutely responsible.
I'm going to say this in terms of the police department. I had a partner who's now retired, who was a lieutenant in the police department for over 40 years, right? And his intention was around the fact of inherent racism within the police department of New York City.
I would have been just as comfortable being a teacher.
And he hit ceilings, glass ceilings, because he spoke out where he couldn't go any further, he wanted to be a captain.
And curtain. Let's give it up out there in Zoom land for these folks, for our panelists. Thank you. Demetrius, Jofrane, Michael, Miguel, thank you very much. And
Awesome.
everybody bring the mask back. Excellent.
Excellent job, everyone. So we're going to have a talk back, and I see some hands even in our attendee. You guys can start throwing your questions into that Q&A box for our panelists. And let's bring Cynthia in here as well. And we just want to start talking to you guys about that was a wonderful job. And for those of you who don't know, we had some Zoom technical difficulties in the beginning, so we jumped into that beautifully. I just want to commend you all. And let's just start talking about what was that experience like to, yay, Cynthia.
Hi, everybody.
Let's start with Jofrane and Miguel. You guys interviewed each other and both performed.
What's up, Cynthia?
Hey, D. Officer D.
He is fine when it comes from you.
So Jofrane, Miguel, what was that experience like? And specifically, what was interviewing each other and then performing? What did you learn about the other?
You want to go first?
Sure, thank you. So we had talked about this a little bit prior. You know, Jofrane and I spoke for about 3 hours, and we had never met prior to that interview. And over the course of those 3 hours, we had a chance to not only get to know each other a little bit, but to really explore some of the questions that surround policing today. And in the course of putting together today's show, we gave each other the space to kind of examine these topics and really listen to each other in terms of where we were coming from. And for me, there were times where I definitely didn't agree what I was hearing, but I understood that was something that Jofrane had experienced, and to be able to hear her explain that out, and to be able to digest that and take that as part of something that is present, changed how I looked at some of the things that we were talking about.
We definitely had like a flowing conversation that we literally had to stop ourselves and say, maybe we should stop now and not give like a 5-hour recording. But just seeing how intrigued and he was just very attentive to what I was saying. And, I was seeing him kind of look at some of the experiences that he was in, or just being able to understand where I was coming from, because he did work in my neighborhood and in Flatbush for so long. So it just really felt good to have like a conversation, even though, we may have not agreed all the time, but it was good to have that with a police officer, and especially somebody I never met. Like the conversation, we were just so intrigued by one another,
Awesome. What about Demetrius, Cynthia? Cynthia performed Demetrius last week.
And he captured a little bit. He captured a little bit of my essence tonight. I liked hearing my words. I mean, it was interesting to hear my words come from him. What I appreciated, because I really didn't want to do this. Like I said last week, I didn't want to do this. I mean, I was just angry, whatever. But with having experienced it even for the second time, there's so much opportunity for understanding and empathy when you have a chance to talk, interview, and just get behind somebody else's eyes who's doing a different job than you, a very important job, in terms of our society. And just to get behind his eyes and to hear others, getting behind the eyes of their counterparts is valuable. I don't know how we can have, how the country can have more dialogue, authentic dialogue. But I thought I just, I'm sold on this, even though I didn't want to do it. So
we're glad you did, Cynthia. We are.
And Cynthia, thank you for joining us.
I can hear Cynthia's voice coming through Demetrius's mouth right now.
I ain't want to do it.
And Demetrius, what was that like for you?
Well, first,
See?
I just want to thank her for allowing me to space with her, because talking to her, she exudes everything that I believe in as a mother figure, first and foremost. Just Black excellence and empowerment. I think when we had a conversation, she had mentioned who are your heroes, and it stuck there. Like I really revisited that, just so you know, Cynthia. And I said, you know what, you are a hero within its own right of Brownsville, and I think that you should be celebrated. A lot more people like you should be celebrated and brought to the forefront. And
Thank you.
just being able to have that, like I said, time. You can't put a value on time, I feel, because you know, she's did 25 years in the schooling system, and just that knowledge that she has, it's like, you know what, write the book, and I definitely
think about that.
and that's just a part of life that is needed. I think we're missing that. I miss, like, even on this job, like, you know, you used to have guys with like 25 years on that would teach you. Now you got guys out here with 3 years on that are trying to tell you how to do the job, and it's like, you don't even know the job yourself. So to have that track record that she has, I try to embody that, just thinking of everything that she's been through.
Yeah. And you have, like I said, you do have that, you know, you have that personal energy that engages easy and can really support people in, you know, I feel in their times of need. So yeah, I
I'm
learned a
definitely
lot.
glad Demetrius wasn't the cop that roughed me up.
You just want me to rub you. I'm not a violent person. I'm so meek. I don't want to hurt nobody.
Treat him in your face.
Michael Sanders, what about you? I know I don't think Henry's here tonight, but
No, he's not. Yeah, it was interesting being Henry. Henry is very, very assured of himself as a police officer, you know, and he takes a lot of pride in that. And he's also very cool, you know. And I hope I gave him a decent representation, you know. I stressed a little bit because of the volume thing. I had to be louder than I thought that he would be, because his voice is very smooth and laid back, you know. But we didn't talk for 3 hours, but we talked for about an hour and a half, you know. And it was particularly interesting to me because, you know, there's a big, not just cultural, but geographical, age, everything. We are very different from each other, you know. He's from Queens. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm probably about 30 or 40 years older than he is. I don't know. And he was saying to me that, you know, one of the things he said in the interview was like, he said, I don't have any 66-year-old Black friends. I said, well, you have one now. But I really liked him, you know. And I saw his version of me. I liked it very much. The accent was all right, you know, but when he was talking, there were certain words that he said exactly like me, you know, and I was very impressed with that. I thought to myself, you know, he probably, after he retires, he probably should pursue an acting career, you know. He has some skills.
I want to bring in a couple of the chat questions, if that's okay. So Laura Ann Walker asks, were any of your opinions or beliefs changed after interviewing the other person with different views? Do you now understand the other side, or do you still feel just the same as you did before?
I would say yes. Taking the time to actually go back and listen to our recordings that you had did for us, Terry. Cynthia had brought up a point of the difference between defunding and reforming with police. And I had to step back from the police mindset of myself to really process that and understand the difference in it. Because, you know, when something affects you, it's kind of like you don't want it's like, oh, it's just negative for us, period. It just feels negative for us. So it's kind of like you put the blinders up, like, no, I don't want to see that come to life in a sense, because it's just hindering us. And when I got to step out of that and then process the fact that reform is reform, and the finances of defunding is just that, it's just a finance. It's money that we have, and it's just being channeled a different route. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with how it's being used, but I could understand her point behind that after tonight reading her words.
I definitely wanted to see, like, what is it in the conversation, and just putting myself in an officer's position, like, you know, how is it for them? And that's kind of the first time around that I did TPSU 6. I really was intrigued by just having just a real conversation without them, you know, like hitting me upside the head, arresting me and saying, oh, I'm upset now. You know, you can easily hurt somebody's feelings in the street and end up in handcuffs. So having the opportunity to just really be straightforward and upfront, I couldn't let that go. And just hearing him in his voice when we were talking, just him being able to place himself and just kind of think about the situations, like I could see it in his face. I can see like he was like thinking about like his actions, and I don't know if maybe, you know, down the road he'll think of me when he's in a situation where he might have to put somebody in the head like, no, you're a human, I'm gonna leave you.
I mean, definitely. I think you know, during the course of the interview, when we were talking about the different subjects, you know, I began to realize that, you know, the perception is a lot of times more important than the reality. And because that's what that person is seeing, and that's what that person, you know, believes to be true. And, you know, we kind of discovered together some of those topics, you know, and, you know, it definitely reminds you that you have to shift out of your own viewpoint and put yourself in someone else's place so that you can understand on their side what's going on.
I want to piggyback on what Miguel said, because when speaking with Demetrius, his joy, you know, and compassion came through. And I often think like, wow, I mean, he really made me begin to think even more deeply, like, it's a hard job. How do you manage your emotions, your feelings of self-worth, your feelings of just when you have to do some of the hardest things in life, working with other people, and then at the end of the day, go home and try to, you know, and try to, you know, decompartmentalize almost. It's almost like you have a split personality. And being able to reconcile who you are and do the job with compassion and love, that when I interface with Demetrius, I mean, I got that from him, but that's extremely hard. That's Definitely. Extremely hard to do.
Especially in a split second when like you have to, you know, you have to be safe as a police officer, but at the same time, yes, we want you all to be human and to think about, you know, what the person is going through, but you know, the police officer could be going through something as well. And that was like a point that me and Miguel had got to. It's like, you know, the police officer could be having a bad day at home or whatever the case may be. Now they got to go to work and they got to stop you because you're speeding. And, you know, if it's me, I'm going to smile and be like, hi, you know, I'm not speeding, but I really am. You know, it's like, but, you know, or I could be having a bad day and just be upset and be like, well, why are you pulling me over? You know, so it's a hard place to be in when everybody is living their lives. Everybody is living in the same world. And especially right now, in this moment that we have all type of crises going on and people are losing families and friends and so forth. You know, we all are going through it, officers alike. So, you know, it's definitely hard to be an officer. I enjoy being a civilian.
When I was,
go ahead, Michael.
When I was having the conversation with Henry, I thought about that. the idea that it's always two perspectives, how the officer perceives you and how you perceive the officer, and they very seldom coincide, you know. But how wonderful it would be if we could give each other the benefit of the doubt. It's very hard to be a police officer and do that because, you know, but I think there has to be a point where you can, you know, kind of keep your hand on your gun, but still talk to the human being like a human being. Now, my grandmother used to say, whenever you talk to anybody, talk to them like you're talking to Jesus. She's a very Christian woman. So she was like, talk to them like they're talking to Jesus. And I understood what she meant by that. It's like you wouldn't yell and scream at Jesus. You would talk to Jesus like, that's my buddy, that's my partner, that's Jesus, you know. And but just the conversation part, you know, because when there's ever a problem between the officer and the police, both of us are already kind of pissed off, you know. Okay, he's stopping me. Okay, I've got to stop this guy for this. I don't need this. I got a lot of things to do. Why have I got to stop him? But if we can take a moment, like in Henry's dialogue, he mentioned talking about the community and people saying that, you know, you're just picking on me because I'm black. You know, I said, well, wait a minute. Let's take a step back. Let's look at this. Everybody's black, you know. Just things like that, you know, and I think that's very important, you know. And I wanted to ask this question though. Because I know that and I heard this from the other session, that a lot of times police don't like to go for therapy because it's considered weak if you complain about, you know, your struggle. Is that still the case? I mean,
I know I spoke about that, Mike. When we were in our class in 2019, they finally had cleared something. I mean, obviously, COVID has done things to the world that none of us are really gonna get that back. But in 2019, they had put in a place where officers could go free of charge to sit on the couch and express certain things and not be scrutinized for it. Because back when I first started out, like back in 2005, 2006, if you were to say something like, listen, I just need some downtime, you know, I'm stressed, the job is stressing me, home is stressing me, they would make you vouch for your guns. Like they would basically take your guns away from you and strip you of your shield almost, because you became a liability in a sense. And that's the conflict of policing per se. It's like you want to be as transparent as you can with the department, but it's just certain things that this department does to us that it's like, oh, I can't do that, or I can't say that because, you know what, that might cost me my career, or that may cause harm to my livelihood of how I provide in a sense. There was a detective, I'll share this with you, a simple candid word. He said the problem with the departments is it lacks us to have a personality. The department doesn't like officers with personality. That's why I'm always in trouble. I feel they don't want us to have a personality.
Right, we're supposed to conform.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, just to
go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Miguel. No,
I was just going to say really quick, just to piggyback on Demetrius, his statements. Yeah, there was definitely a point in time where, you know, if you said something about being stressed, that was going to cause you a lot of trouble. And there have been some changes in regards to that. There should be more. But yeah, it's definitely something that in the past would have caused you a lot of grief as a police officer.
Now, see, that's where reform and innovation comes in. See, that's where reform and innovation comes in, because that's a mindset. As much as you see death and dying, y'all see some pretty horrendous things that impacts the psyche of the human. So, I mean, you know, when you think about companies like Google and Amazon that have pods, nap pods, sleeping areas. No, I'm serious.
I know.
To support the people physically and creatively. I'm like, the people who are on the front lines, y'all should have that. I don't understand it. So that you can recharge and give optimally. And to think that that's a bad idea, or it just happened recently that you can go and talk to somebody and you do that kind of work is arcane.
It's like
Absolutely.
the machine wants them to just be a machine. Like,
Hey, yeah.
Speaking of machines, we have a, that's a perfect segue. I was waiting for the segue. We have a question from Eddie, I believe. How can we work on police perception in our communities and not be racist? When the police union endorsed Donald Trump for re-election, when this president refuses to condemn white supremacy. And I'll put that out to whoever wants to answer it, especially the cops.
Wait,
I
what
will.
was the middle part of that though?
And then Jakia, you can,
Because you're breaking up.
Jakia, you can gang on this too.
Oh, it says what? How do we change the perception?
Yes, how can we work on police perception in our communities and not look upon the institution of policing as inherently racist, especially when the police union endorsed Donald Trump for re-election, or when this president refuses to condemn white supremacy?
So, from the time he was running to the present day, I am confused at how we as people are still expecting anything but what he has given us. And so when you start to expect things from a person that has a mind of a 4-year-old, you begin to lose your way. So I feel like in order to change the perception within the police department, you have to understand, like, I can't get upset at him sitting there saying what he's saying. I'm going to get upset at the person who has a mind of their own and can use it and can make a decision based off of morale, principle, and reality. See, right now, our current leadership is not working in reality. He literally is working through a television screen, literally. So us sitting home, I don't watch him, so I don't judge anyone who does, but us sitting home and listening to him is what is continually decreasing the intelligence in our country overall. Because we're still expecting him to wake up, just like we're automatically expecting the police department to stop, shooting unarmed people. No, we have to have the officer see that you have an opportunity to make the right decision. So what are you going to go home with? You're going to shoot this individual because you have the opportunity, or are you scared? See, there's two sides of that. Because I do honestly believe that some officers, they're afraid. They're afraid. If you grow up on Long Island around, other white people your entire life, and you're a 17-year-old Tommy who wants to be like his grandfather or his uncle and be a police officer, and now you're in a neighborhood with people that you just don't understand, you have a decision. Now, Tommy, you can get to know these people on a level where you're comfortable enough to police in a way that is humanistic, or you become barbaric because now it's like it's a life or death situation. You're like, you know what, I'm gonna get home. So we need to, not only in our government, but in our own realities, in our own world, realize that we are the people who are making these things happen. And if we all just got there,
it would be to hear.
I think a part of what's embedded in that question, along with what you said, Jofrane, is the institution of policing as inherently racist, and how do cops deal with that fact if they believe that to be so, or how do they deal with the fact that they're working with a community that thinks that that is so?
Well,
And
first of all, can I piggyback on that, because it's just not the institution of policing. It's the health institutions, the educational institutions, the financial institutions in America. And it just didn't start with Trump. Trump is the tip of the iceberg. So if he wasn't here, it would still be going on. Going on in the background. Yeah, the thing is, I think that we have to recognize this is where we are in the mix. and become committed to doing the work. Each entity needs to commit to doing the work. Now, the fact when Trump says, okay, he's going to erase, we're not going to do any cultural responsibility education, and we're not going to, this bias training, I'm not going to fund it. I mean, it is up to the cities, the local cities, municipalities, the governors to just like, hey, and the people to say, this is what we want and this is where we're going. And he's just the tip of the iceberg. The whole country is sick,
And so
including black and white and brown people.
Can I say something? Donald Trump basically won by appealing to the racism in this country. He's not going to ever change from doing that. He wants to win, so that's what he's trying to do. The head of the police union, his job is to support, his constituency, and he does that no matter what. He is not a favorite of mine. I don't like him at all, but I have to say that he's very efficient in supporting police because no matter what they do, he's going to support them. And right now, Donald Trump is the president that's shown to be very supportive of police, but he actually treats police like they're his personal gang, like they're the brown shirts for him or something. I don't believe that that's true, and I think that the bottom line is policemen are individuals. No, I know Demetrius is not going to vote for Donald Trump, but there may be some policemen that will.
Well, let me ask a question. Can we get a few police voices in there on this one?
I'd like to chime in really quick. I think it's a deeper philosophical question. Is the police force a singular body, or is the police force made up of individuals with their own thoughts and biases and perceptions of the world? And there's leadership at different levels, right? And at the end of the day, it's still an organization made up of individuals. We have people that have varying degrees of political persuasions, political viewpoints within the same department. We all work together. We all come together to get the job done. Whether or not you particularly like one person's particular viewpoint, well, I mean, we're in a society where people have different viewpoints and they're supposed to be celebrated, right? So, at the end of the day, it's up to each individual officer to go out and do his job effectively and to do it in a way that keeps in mind the community that he's trying to serve. And I think 90 or 95% of the officers that I've come into contact with follow that viewpoint.
At the end of the day, though, is it individual? Because I believe leadership starts at the head. And so if people in a community decide that they're going to place leaders who have a viewpoint, that is, I mean, everybody's biased in some way, but has a viewpoint around humanistic and community policing and pushes that viewpoint, that agenda in their, over the precincts that they had, it would impact it. So I think the people have to be very cogent about who we put into leadership positions, the leaders of the people. Who are the leaders?
I agree with that in a political sense. In terms of the overall, in terms of the police department's union strategy, that's someone like Michael Sanders had said, is there to efficiently represent the constituents of the union. And while you may not like his particular viewpoint on policy or politics, there's some decisions that he makes that are in the best interests of the actual police officers first. With that said, there's definitely room for, leaders in our department to, go ahead and bring the community together in a more effective way. And I think that you see that happening on the actual end of I'm sorry, I got distracted by something that popped up on the screen.
It was that white supremacist thing that you said, right?
I want to get that audience question in there. So related to this, can police officers do their job effectively with no bias if you are a white supremacist?
No.
If they are white supremacists?
No. Let's be clear. Union based, right? We all know what a union is. If not, let's think about it in a standpoint of policing and a union. That doesn't make sense. It's almost like a flip side to a coin. What I mean by that is our union, we're not supposed to have any political affiliation. We're prior military. We're supposed to stay far left from that. So to be out here endorsing is the key word that Cynthia used, which I wanted to chime in on, it is agenda. Let's not act like there are people on this job that don't have agendas. This man is up for retirement. He wants to go work in a private sector or something like that, or wants to remain in a political party. He just took his seat. I'm not saying that's his case because I don't want to sit up there and do a Trump thing and put out false facts. But at the end of the day, when you start to get to your 20th, 25th year, you have to align yourself for upward mobility and opportunity. That's just the American way. People want opportunity for certain things. To go in a sidebar of what the question is with supremacy, the quota exists, period. It did. We went from UF-250s to stop reports to stuff like that. Let's not act like the police isn't a tool where we enforce certain areas differently. There's a truth to it. There's a truth to it. We're looking for male blacks from the age of 18 to 25 committing these crimes. Now, granted, there are numbers that prove that to be the case in certain areas, but the way we go about it is what looks militant. When you put these lights out there and you got these posts out there for 24 hours manning a certain area in Brooklyn or manning a certain area, and you don't do it in Park Slope, you don't do it in the Dumbo, you don't do it. So yes, the key point that Miguel said that I was like, wow, you know what, we really need to revisit that is the reality of it is not revisited to the perspective of what we show. Now, we're doing good work as police officers out there. There are guns in the street. There are people out here committing crimes. There are people dying constantly in New York. But when you go ahead and paint the picture for the masses, in a sense, it looks like we're a militant force that's just doing what you all are saying. Like, oh, the cops are just, here we go, they're harassing these people. Or here they go, they're just taking their power. They're a supremacist group. And it's like, no, that's not the case. Men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. That's how, like, if we could just do that and be like, look, at the end of the day, there are more black people that kill black people than white people. It's just a truth to it. There's numbers to that. And when you say it, it's like, yeah, but there are black officers that never did this, or there's white officers. It has nothing to do with that. There have been less officers that have killed people in New York. We're not talking about what's happening down south, because then you have to go to a history standpoint. But just officers in general in New York. If we kept it in New York.
Okay, so I'm gonna actually I'm gonna chime in here for a second and use my extraordinary, unspeakable power as a facilitator and put in another question, actually, because I think this will lead us to some other places. Police and civilians, question for you. Have you tried to bring your realizations and new thoughts that you have gleaned from this experience back to either your fellow officers or your neighbors, friends, and coworkers? And if so, what has some of that reaction been? And I think I'm going to ask Jakia, actually, if you would, to chime in here, because you and I have spoken about this a little bit.
So I have, like I was saying, well, in an interview prior, I have a close friend who really don't like cops. Like, she cannot stand cops at all. And it's so weird because this is my best friend for over 15 years. And like, we still go at it. She respects me, obviously, because she's my friend. But anything police related, like, we don't see eye to eye at all. Like, I actually think I want to get her on the next TPSU. Like, I need her up here, like, because I just need her to, I don't think I would do it. Like, I need her to just be able to, like, interview another cop and just maybe just get her on board.
Yeah, I would say I've always brought information back to my community. I was always that bookworm type of person that would go through the hood and be like, did you go to class today? Did you go to school? So I was always that person, and I love to bring back information. I definitely brought back this program and said, look, I told a few people that you need to go ahead and go into this program. And really get yourself to a place where you can have better interactions in the street. One thing for sure, I know in having the experience of TPSU, I realized that there was a few friends that I probably lost and turned away from because they became either some part of law enforcement. And it wasn't like malicious, like, I don't want to be your friend anymore. It was more in the terms of when they became part of the force, it kind of swole them up like, I'm an officer and da da da. And so everything that they were prior, or the person that they were, all of a sudden, because you're a police officer, now this has changed. So I think maybe in that dynamic, in retrospect now, I could have probably been more open to their perspective in terms of them just being in the force. But at that time, it was kind of like, oh, so now you're being indoctrinated into the gang. So have fun with that.
I think I think maybe that's why we're probably still friends, is because I have a gun in the shield, like I've never changed. Like I was a correction officer before this. Like I've always remained who I was, who I believed in, and it didn't get to my head. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why we're probably still friends, because I always remain the same. And I just feel like some people should. I mean, yeah, you have power, you have a gun and shield, but that should never change who you are.
Very interesting question here. This is from Damon, who's in California, who is an Irondaler, Irondale West. What are kids' relationships to the cops, do you think? It's an opinion and a question. What do you think the kids and children of our communities, how do you think they see policing?
Is this for all of us?
Yeah, yep. Well, let's start with the cops, though. I'm curious. What is your experience of that on the street?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Jakia.
Well, for me, I'm a youth officer, so I work with kids. It varies. Most of them really don't like cops, though. It's really is bad. And I think obviously what they see, they just really a lot of them really don't really mess with cops. Some of the children I do deal with, I'm able to speak with them and just try to just get through their heads and have some type of understanding. Some I do get through to, and some is just like, F you, I don't care, but that's how it is.
Anyone else?
Well, I have a 6 and an 8-year-old, and before, they really didn't have like any negative connotations for cops or anything like that. It's not until the situation with George Floyd that they actually had any type of reaction to police officers. They ended up having a conversation in their class, and they were told that the officers did this thing. So at that time, they were like, oh, officers are bad and this, that, and the third. And so I kind of had to step in, and be a responsible parent. The inner 21st Brooklynite in me was like, yeah, they're horrible. But I know I had to be responsible in gearing her and saying, look, it's not all officers, and trying to give that to kids. I had to give that to my kids and say, look, it's not every situation that ends up that way. It's not every police interaction that you're going to end up dead, because they at that point they were like, oh, this officer's going to kill me and this, that, and the third. So I think maybe with certain instances with these publicized situations with officers, it does change some kids and their viewpoints, because they probably thought officers were heroes. That's what they're taught in school.
All right.
Okay. you know, you know what I thought was is interesting about this is that the force is made up of a lot of men. Okay, it's made up of males. And when I was a principal, I'm just thinking about this now. You know, that male image was, you know, it was, they were looked up to. You know, I mean, many of the kids looked up to the male image in the police force, the police who came into the building, because not many of in you know, some of our homes, they didn't have daddies that were present every day. So now here you do this like, okay, this is somebody who has power, who has, you know, who has the ability to make decisions to protect me. On some, I'm talking about with little kids. And it used to be where you would find the media did not show, you know, the media supported good images of you know, relationships between police officers, PAL, the Young Explorers, all of those things were supported through the media. That's like down, you don't see much of it through the media. And then kids watch TV and they're on the internet and they see the violence.
Mm-hmm.
Police officer, you said, I mean, for me, I don't know if you know about this, maybe Terry does, Officer Joe Bolton. Do you remember him?
I definitely remember.
Okay. We had an Officer Joe Bolton that was on TV every Sunday, every day, teaching, you know, good stories about all kinds of things. We don't have that. What you see is SWAT. You see, you know, Chicago MD or PD. What? So I think in terms of our culture, we need to support better images for our kids, and that relationship go a long way.
I definitely want to piggyback off of Cynthia, because just the perception in our neighborhoods is just that. It's like when we're little kids and we're in kindergarten and first grade, it's like, do you want to be a police officer? It's hyped up and it's, you know, the image is so great. But then you go home and police officers, in my experience, are putting your friends up against the wall. And you're trying to understand why, you know, is this part of policing? So you go, as a child, you go through that battle where it's like, you know, I know that this person is supposed to protect me. That's what I'm told. But then I'm seeing this person do something that is totally unnecessary. So in a lot of our neighborhoods, we get that confusion. Kids get that confusion. First, it's like, I want to be a police officer. Then you go outside and you hear things happening. It's like, no, I don't want to be that. You know, I know that the police department has the ability to police correctly because they do it in the suburbs. They police, I think if the same model was taken for the suburbs and put into the urban neighborhoods, we'd probably have a better, like, harmony within just the image of an officer.
I agree. But one thing, John, this is a question though, because
speaking of harmony, hold on, Demetrius. I'm going to let you speak, but you can only get 3 sentences because you're like me, brother. You love to hear the sound of your own voice. I feel you. Go ahead, go for it.
Growing up in a certain area,
go for it.
So she's a mother, right? So as a mother, it starts with a mother first, because walking in a project sometimes, that's like I grew up in one. It was like they used to be like, "Oh, I'm gonna get him to lock you up." It's like if you paint that perspective for the child, now what are we supposed to do?
Oh my gosh, I hate that. Not to cut you off.
No, I want you to, because I just want people to see the dialogue, because that's happened to me and fellow officers constantly.
It still happens to me now.
Yes. So I'm like,
I agree with you 100% on that.
It's the education. It's the education, because they're trying to find a way to control and morph this child into what they want them to be. So they think putting that fear of being arrested in the child is going to change the child's behavior, which in retrospect, in reality, it's going to actually put that child in a position where it's like, okay, well, I don't care. Well, I'm going to get in trouble anyway. They're going to arrest me anyway, or they're going to kill me anyway. My mom is going to get me arrested. You know, that hood mentality, I agree with you, is disgusting. And even when I see it, you know, at times, sometimes, you know, depending on the type of person that is doing it, I'll say, maybe not so. You're going to make the baby have a bad image. But then again, there's some people that you can't tell them anything.
Joe Frayne.
But some of them teach their kids that. Like,
go ahead.
Okay, so how do you civilians and how do you cops combat that and this question came from a guy named Ken, who's an Irondaler. How do you combat that very perception that sometimes the community itself creates?
It's difficult because when you hear go ahead, Michael. You want to go? Go, Michael.
I know she's a teacher, so I'm raising my hand. No, I just
and it worked too. It stopped you in your tracks.
I just want to say very quickly, and you'll appreciate this, Cynthia. One of the things that needs to happen, policemen and teachers are underpaid people. They're underpaid. You need to put some more money in their pockets. Policemen make money mostly by doing a lot of overtime.
Right.
Okay, but your job is tough enough. You shouldn't be doing overtime.
I feel the same.
I agree with that.
Overtime. You should have enough money in your pocket to be a policeman and live a good life, and make it so that people would try to compete for that job. Then people wouldn't say, okay, but we've got these bad policemen, but if we get rid of them, who do we have to take their place? It should be a line standing outside for people coming in saying, I want to get this job. You know, this is a good job.
That's a little bit of Pandora's box, though.
Back after what Michael was going to say. And what I was going to say before that was the fact that society, if a police officer comes into a housing projects and the mother says to Jakia, take him to jail. The perception is she wants you to be the daddy. She wants you to be the mommy. They want you to be the parent. You are not the parent. There's a confusion there. We are saying, I'm as a parent, and I used to say this to my parents, you're giving up your rights to be the parent. Maybe you don't know how. We got to teach you how. But the police officer is not supposed to be whipping your child's tail and taking them off to jail. There's a disconnect.
And yep.
Okay.
I want to jump in with one more comment question from our audience. So we were talking about the police officer's role, a lot of conversation about the individual officer versus the institution. Pedro says, isn't the police first and foremost an institution which overrides individual character? And I want to add to this question of, and I think Demetrius, you brought this up, right? It's law enforcement is the job. Law enforcement. So there is this issue of law, which I think, we can't avoid the issue of law. And therefore we can't avoid the issue of politics as much as we would want to put it aside. So I'm curious too, and we talked about this, I think, a few times throughout the different groups. If you're a law enforcement officer, what happens when you have to enforce a law that you inherently do not agree with? I'm so curious what that is like.
One word: discretion. Discretion.
Absolutely.
They cannot take away our discretion. And as an officer, just practice it. That's all I'm gonna say. Discretion.
Yeah. Just to chime in on that. Yeah, discretion. It's every officer has a certain level of discretion that we're allowed to use, and there are some things that we're allowed to just give a pass on, and there's other things that our hands are tied. But overall, I think it always comes back to the individual. Who are you? How are you interacting with someone else? How are you treating that person? For me, it's very simple. It's very clear cut. But I do understand that on the outside looking in, people see this monolith of policing and they want to just kind of put it in a category that makes them comfortable. But at the end of the day, there are good decisions being made and there are bad decisions being made. And it's up to that individual officer to kind of sort that out and try to come up with the best outcome.
So just to follow that up,
The-
how is discretion? So if discretion, how is that not? It sounds like that's in some ways the role of being a judge, that in a moment you actually get to make a decision and to judge how a person gets to be treated. That what I'm hearing, at least, and please tell me if I'm wrong, is that there's the law, but the officer actually does have a moment of discretion to decide whether to sounds like a much bigger role. That sounds like the role of a judge.
I mean,
Whether to enforce it or not, but that sounds like a role of a judge.
well, like Miguel said though, it depends. Our hands are tied by law. So by law, if I witness a man assaulting a woman, I can no longer use my discretion in that point. It's assault is assault. So it's a fine print, no different than, okay, if you ran a red light though, now I can give you a warning, like, listen, slow down. I don't know what you got going on in your life. You ran the red light. I can look the other way with that. That's discretion. But when you take it where our hands are tied, we have no choice but to do our job.
And that's a good point of distinction to make, Demetrius, is that there are certain situations. If somebody pulls a gun on somebody, that person's going to jail if I'm there, right? Now, if somebody runs a red light and it's not that big of a deal, and it works out better that we give them a warning, then that's what we do.
But we've seen instances, right, where that ticket giving to, let's say, someone jumping a subway turnstile, those moments might seem like small discretions, but that can be a huge judgment in the repercussions for somebody's life. I guess that what I'm just hearing is what a what a big deal that moment of discretion actually is. That's a lot of responsibility and power.
Can I jump in?
I agree. That's no different than Terry when you watch Terry talk about the Eric Garner situation, when we're starting to miss cues. That's why this program, I feel, is so significant, because we have to home in on those triggers, as you would call it, a trigger. If you see that, it's like, okay, let me slow down, take that breath, and reassess.
Yeah, and I think even for a civilian, in understanding that officers do have discretion, I think the interaction and approach of the civilian actually impacts that discretion that officers use, because you can have an officer that pulls you over, like maybe for a broken tail light or something simple. And if a civilian automatically meets that officer with anger and distaste and so forth, if that officer was going to give them a pass, it's kind of like, okay, well, you're really clearly upset. Let me go ahead and give you your ticket and have you on your way. There have been times where just even in the energy that you bring to the police interaction, I think it does, as a civilian, I do see that it does play a part. And so I think we as civilians have to understand too that, yeah, officers do have discretion and we have to not break the law and so forth. But we also have to meet them with a kind of mutual respect and saying, okay, yeah, I know I did something here. Kind of maybe take responsibility. I've found that when I've seen interactions with some officers, if the person is calm and kind of like, all right, I know you're doing your job, kind of give that officer understanding, the officer has more of a I guess intention that they're going to be nicer. Like if you're nice to a person, they kind of have no choice but to be nice to you in a sense. So
I'm going to do what I
it's on both parts.
Dinner tables, and I'm going to end the conversation here just when it's getting really good. And I'm sorry to do that, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We've been at this for over an hour and a half, and you guys are amazing.
It's needed. We need more of these conversations in the community across the board. It is needed.
So I want to thank you all one more time. Big round of applause from Zoomland and from us. And I want to say good night to our folks at home who are watching. It takes a lot of moving parts to do a project like this. And not only do I have two greatest facilitators in the world working with me on this, Rivka and Michael David, but
yes,
Barbara Chen, you've been a remarkable addition to this project, and Renata Suarez, who really earned her money tonight, because the tech stuff was going haywire all the way until we
It was
actually
crazy.
And all the people who have funded us and gotten this program off the road, we're trying to figure out ways to make this a national program where we train artists in other cities to do this work with their local police departments. That takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of money to continue this program, as a matter of fact. And we will get to a point where we're either doing this online as workshops, or we'll be doing it here at the theater again. And I hope that will happen sooner rather than later. But if you're looking, and this is a tough time for everybody right now. I know that. I know everybody's pocketbooks are tight and nobody knows what the future is going to bring. But if you've got some discretionary income,
Speaking of discretion, yes.
it would be great to donate it to a project like this, because we need to keep this going and we're committed to doing it. We're going to do it no matter what happens, but you can help. And if you want to help, please contact us at online at irondale.org. Go to our website and you'll get all the information there. I want to close tonight with another piece of poetry. This by a Sunni poet, Sumi, that says, "Out beyond the fields of right doing and wrongdoing, there is another field. I'll meet you there." So I want to thank all our panelists. I want to thank you for tuning in. And you guys all stay online. We're going to say goodnight to each other because this is the last time we'll see each other for a while. And everybody else, thanks.
Thank you, folks out there in Zoom land. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Be
guys.
safe. Don't forget to vote.
Vote. Vote.